performing evaluations, performance and evaluations. Okay. Under this subclass 9, performance and evaluations, they have 3 subclass: 9.1, monitoring, measure, analysis and evaluations; 9.2, internal audit; 9.3, management review. So from the keyword here, class 9, performance means the output or the outcome. Second is evaluate, evaluations. Okay, I believe you are still awaiting your result for the test 1. Okay, that's your performance because you want to evaluate. So for time being, I just manage to, because there are many number of students, 100 something. That's why it takes time for me to read all your answer, but it's almost 80%. So after I finish marking all this, then I will release the mark to tell you about your performance. But here, class 9 is about performance and evaluation that related with the ISO 14001. Okay, what's the requirement under 9.1, monitoring, measurement, analysis, evaluation subclass? Okay, we go to 9.1.1, which is general requirement. The organization should, okay, monitor, measure, analyze, evaluate. Okay, but what? Its environmental performance. Okay. So the focus of monitoring here, or measurement or analysis or evaluation, is about its environmental performance. Performance related to the environment. And the organization should determines, okay, what need to be monitored and measured, what is the method used for monitoring, measure, analysis and evaluate, especially to ensure that your data, your result is a valid, precise and valid. And what is the criteria that you use for evaluations on your environmental performance? Okay, and you must also provide appropriate indicator. For example, like as a student, your academic performance based on what criteria? Grading. Okay, that is the criteria. If you get a mark below 80, then you will get a grade A, for example. If you between 70 to 80, you grade B, and so on. And that is the criteria. And then what's the indicator? Okay, indicator is you graduate, for example, at the end of this program or courses that you took for 3 years, if you graduate with a CGPA 3 and 3.5 and above, so they give indicator you are in the group of great students that we can grade you as a first class degree honors. So that's the indicator, right? So same goes to this ISO 14001. You must determine the criteria. You must also have the indicator so that you can evaluate your environmental performance. Right? So next is when the monitoring shall be performed. Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Is it twice a year? Is it a year? Okay, annually, once a year. Okay, when the result from the monitoring shall be analyzed and evaluated. you evaluate every day? Is it you evaluate every week, every month? So you need to identify this when. Next, the ensure the calibrated or verified monitoring and measure is used and maintained as appropriate. Okay, and of course, when you monitor and measure, you use instruments. You use machine or any product, for example. So these machines, these instruments must be validated. Okay, so to ensure you get a precise and valid data. Okay, so that you can get what are called meaningful data, so that you can evaluate your environmental performance. So you can measure your effectiveness of environmental management system. And next, you need to communicate relevant environmental performance and effectiveness of this environmental management system. And lastly, you need to retain appropriate documented information as evidence of the monitoring, measure, analysis, evaluation result. So this is the general requirements. Okay, so this is general requirement. Next, under the monitoring, measure, analysis, evaluations, under subclass 9.1.2, evaluation of compliance. Next, this is after you get all the data about environmental performance, then you try to evaluate whether it's comply or not. Okay, you need to establish, implement, maintain of what? The obligation. Okay, so the processes needed to evaluate fulfillment of its compliant obligations. So is it any environmental performance? I mean your result, okay, that follow any regulations or legislation. Yeah, for example, like your performance of emission, air or pollutant to the atmosphere, or performance about the wastewater that release to the drainage, or is it the amount of the hazardous chemical that you are disposed. Okay, mean the amount in terms of liter, for example. Okay, therefore the organization should determine the frequency that compliance will be evaluated. How frequent you evaluate whether you follow regulation or not. Is it monthly, twice a year? Is it annual? Okay, and then what action taken after this evaluation compliance have conduct? For example, like okay, if based on your environmental performance, and then you check with the regulation requirement, and suddenly you found that your environmental performance beyond the guideline. So what action taken needed, for example? Means if you beyond the guidelines, means you don't follow the regulations. You don't comply with the compliant obligations. So you need to do the correction action. Kena buat kerja pembetulan. Correction action. Okay, you need to do something to correct so that you can comply to the regulation. And then next, you should maintain the knowledge and understanding its compliance status. So you need to keep this record, okay, so that you can understand whether you follow the regulation or not. And this process, the organization should retain documented information as evidence of the compliant evaluation result. So you must have evidence that you already check with the regulations all the performance outcome. Okay, so how to evaluate this? there are many ways, either from the inspections, which do the facilitating tour. Okay, you do some what they call spot check, okay, or direct observation or interview, or project or work review. Based on the report, you can read the report so that you can evaluate, or you can review from the sample analysis or test result and comparize to the regulatory limits. This is the performance outcome. And when you discharge wastewater, you take a sample, you send to the laboratory, and the laboratory produce a result, then you can compare with the regulatory limits. Okay, and then you can do the verification sampling or testing, and also you can review legally requirement documented information, because sometimes there is legal or legislation being revised, need to be updated. You need to follow the latest version. All right. So we finish under class 9.1. Okay. Now we go to the subclass 9.2. Okay, which is internal audit. So under this 9.2 internal audit, they have subclass which is 9.2.1 general requirement under internal audit. Okay, what's the general requirement here? The organization shall conduct internal audit at the planned interval to provide information on whether the long-term management system, okay, what kind of information that you require. So first, here is required in general requirement, you need to conduct internal audit, audit dalaman. At a planned interval means you must have a schedule. Is it once a year? Is it twice a year? Is it every 3 months? So you need to plan. Interval means you are repeating. So why we need to conduct this internal audit? Because you want to collect information. So this information, yeah, will give you, okay, provide you information on what? First, whether you are comfort to, means you are fulfilled or you already follow. Follow of what? Okay, comfort to. First, the organization own requirement for its long-term management system. Means you follow your own requirement, keperluan diri sendiri that related with long-term management system. Okay, so you already create your own requirements. Secondly, based on this internal audit, you will provide whether you are comfort to the requirement of this international standard, which is the ISO 14001. Okay, so that's why you conduct internal audit. You check whether we fulfill or not all these requirements from the class 4 until the class 10. That's the requirement under ISO 14001. Okay. So here you are try to looking the information whether you comfort on two things. First, on your own requirements. Secondly, is about the ISO 14000 requirement, which is the international standard requirement. So that's the first information. Second information that you looking or you would like to find based on this internal audit is about how effective that you implement and maintain the ISO 14001. Okay, perhaps you already fulfill all the requirements. Class 4 until class 10. But how effective you implement the ISO 14001? How effective you maintain this ISO 14001? That is purpose why under class 9.2 internal audit, under 9.2.1 general requirement, why you need to conduct internal audit. Alright, so now we go to the 9.2.2, which is internal audit program. Okay, just now it's about the general requirement. Now it's about the internal audit program requirement. So what is stated here? The organization shall establish, implement, maintain internal audit program. Means you have more than one activity. That's what they call program. Okay, more than one activity of internal audit. Okay, that you are frequency. You have a frequency. It's not one activity. It's not one-time activity. The more than one time. Okay, you need to identify the methods. Okay, who's the responsibility, and how you plan this internal audit. Okay, and how to report. So all this process need to take considerations to the important, the amount of importance of the process concerned, the changes affecting the organization, and the result of the previous audit. So this program, when you want to set up the program, you must consider any changes previous, either from the audit result or from the policy changes. Whatever changes you need to consider when you want to establish internal audit program. Next, the organization shall define the audit criteria and scope of the each audit. Okay, so there's a define the audit criteria. If you want to conduct the audit or audit program, what is the criteria, what is the scope of each audit? Then you need to select the auditor, and also conduct the audit to ensure the objectivity and the impartiality of the audit process. Okay, this is very important. You cannot conduct audit. Okay, for example, you want to audit HR department, which is human resource department. You cannot select the auditor from the HR department staff. Okay, because it could become a bias, because every department staff will try to protect their own departments. That's why the selection of auditor is very crucial here. C, ensure that the result of audit are reported to relevant management. It's no point if you conduct an audit but you keep the information. So you need to report to the relevant management. And all this process should be retained, documented information has evidence of the implementation of audit program and also the audit result. Okay, you must keep all the process, all the documentations you need to keep, and when the external audit comes, then you can show this as evidence that you already fulfill the requirement under 9.2. So this is an example of document. Okay, this is an example of document. If you don't follow or you miss, you need to do correction action. So this is document of corrective action request. You can see here the type of audit, external or internal. So this is the marked as internal audit. And then what's the issue here? Potential non-conformance. Mean potential non-conformance. Means what? You already do correct one, but there's some what they call a step of processes, which if you don't follow, you might have a potential non-conformance. Or you already make a mistake, non-conformance. Or they have a finding or issue need to be highlighted. Okay, and here you can see the root of cause, and then signature by the auditee. Okay, means person that been audited, and this is the person who conduct the audit, the auditor. Okay, this sample took from the MCOT Technologies Sdn Bhd. Okay, now we go to the Okay. Under clause 9, which is the management review. Okay. All right. So what's the requirement here? The top management shall review the organization environmental management system at the planned interval to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. So please take note on these three words: suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. Okay, so normally I will ask you, either in the test or the quiz, what's the meaning of this suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness? Okay, you can find this is in the ISO 14004. What's the meaning of suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness? To ensure that, why the top management should review? Because to do this, they must include consideration of the satisfaction from previous management review. What's the outcome from the previous management review? Changes, any changes in external or internal issue. This is related with the class 4. Need and expectation of interested party, including compliance obligations. Its significant environmental aspect, any changes significant environmental aspect, and risk and opportunity. This is related with the class 6. Okay, and you must also consider the extent to which environmental objective have been achieved or not. All right, we continue. Must also including consideration of information of the organization around the performance. This is what you already done. Okay, under the what they call the previous 9.1. The non-conformity corrective actions, monitoring measure result, fulfillment of compliance obligations, and audit result. All this actually is all under clause 9. Then adequacy resources, relevant combination from interested party, including complaints, and the last one, opportunity for continual improvement. So all this must be considered during management review. During management review. So what's the outcome of management review? Okay, management review means it involves top management. Review means they revise everything about your ISO 14001. So what thing you need to review? The outcome should include. Okay, what can you conclude? Is it your current ISO 14001 is still suitable? Is it adequate? Is it effective? Next, how to improve ISO 40001? Okay, is it require any changes? Okay, so you need to answer this inside your management review, and you must also put action is needed if your objective not being achieved. And you're also looking any opportunity to integrate your ISO 40001 to others business processes if needed. And you must also consider any implication for the strategic direction of the organization or your business activities. Your business future direction. And all this process shall be written documented information as evidence of the result of the measurement review. Okay, so this is the input. Actually, you can read detail on ISO 4004. They are right here. This is actually the information you need to provide during the measurement review, so they can review properly. Okay. Why measurement review important? This is the main goal, so that you can have continual improvement.